right, so now we'll hop right into our program for this morning. We have some good stuff. Can you believe it? 363 days. Oh my God. Okay, so let's hop right into our program. Our first panel is expanding the capabilities of ad effectiveness. I would like to welcome Jim Forrest, SVP of Lucid, up to the stage, and then he will introduce his panel. I'm not good standing still.
Good, thank you.
You got a moving mic.
I got a moving mic. Thank you so much. I'm going to sit right away here. Very excited about this panel. I think everyone has come up to me and it's like, Jim Forrest, this is your first time at SampleCom. Ad effectiveness, great. So I'm very excited about having my friends here, actually, because this is actually a very pretty niche industry. We all know each other. I'm very excited that Arun, Michael, and Dave were able to make it at the last minute, skin of their teeth last night. Otherwise, it would have been Stephen and I just have a heart-to-heart up here. But very excited that everyone can make it. So let me introduce some of these folks. I asked Rachel for their bios because otherwise I'll tell nasty stories about each of them. Stephen, before I'm going to go off script already. So Stephen and I go way back. I've known him as he's been a colleague. I've been his client. I've been his competitor. But throughout this, it's just been great just working with him in all those different capacities or against him. But, so let me actually read his bio. Stephen leads Millward Digital's media measurement and ad effectiveness solutions across the US. He is, thought we were talking about global too. So he has global responsibilities too. He's responsible for the technical account management, project operations, sample operations, research operations, business operations. He just runs the place. Stephen's prior role as SVP, Strategic Clients and Technical Account Management at Inside Express, and 16 years of research experience makes him well-known in the industry as a thought leader around measurement of new and emerging media across both online and offline communications. He went to University of Phoenix, science, business administration programs, and whole certificates from the AMA, American Management Association, in project management and management. Stephen, come over. Yes. Great. Awesome. And you will realize that in ad effectiveness, you have to wear your blue or black jacket, and Michael didn't get the memo that you're supposed to wear jeans too. So next person is Arun, Kumar, and Arun is one of those folks in our industry that can, in many places, just goes by his first name. So you've made it when it's like, oh, Arun, oh yeah, I know Arun. So Arun is with, come over, Arun. Arun is with the newly rebranded Citi Publicis One team. And Arun is a digital analytics leader with specific interests in digital media space. In his current role as global lead for analytics at Citi Publicis One team, he's responsible for helping Citibank optimize their digital marketing decisions, realize the full potential of their marketing spend through cutting-edge data analytics. He has extensive experience across financial services, travel, hospitality industries, and additional focus on auto. Prior to this, Arun served as head of analytics at bizequity.com, where he worked on creating the organization's now patented core valuation algorithm. So thanks a lot, Arun. He is part of advisory member, board member on all sorts of different organizations, including BWG Strategy, which is an invite-only network of senior executives. So very, very lucky to have Arun give us the sort of the end user perspective. So thanks Arun. We got Michael Mandato. Come over, Michael. Michael is director of the GfK Digital Market Intelligence team. Goes by their DMI insignia there. He works with his clients to measure ad effectiveness for digital and cross-media campaigns. Specifically, he helps agencies, publishers, and brands understand how their digital campaigns are performing so they can make more targeted improvements to maximize their ROI. During his tenure, he's overseen implementations of hundreds of successful studies, is an expert in this field. Prior to GfK, he worked at the NPD Group, who we all love, in a variety of roles, including their mobile team. So working on kind of retail strategy with some of the largest wireless carriers and tablet handset manufacturers. Big welcome to Michael. Michael, Michael was the last one to get here. He had that honor, late last night. So, Dave Smith, come over, Dave. Dave and I have some interesting history, related to Ipsos, but we'll leave that aside. Dave leads the Ipsos Connect digital team in North America. His role is threefold: help clients think about how to effectively leverage digital advertising to drive brand impact, work with Ipsos clients to develop effective measurement plans, and create new and innovative digital measurement tools. He has over 15 years developing and measuring digital advertising campaigns, worked with some of the largest global brands. Prior to Ipsos, Dave spent 5 years at Millward and Dynamic Logic, leading a team focused on digital ad effectiveness measurement. He has a bachelor's from Caldwell University and a master's and MBA from Norwich. Did you say Norwich or Norwich? Norwich. Thank you. Yeah. My Spanish, comes out every once in a while. I was like, how do you pronounce that exactly? All right, cool. So one of the things that I wanted to do to just start out with, because this is kind of like a new subject matter for SampleCon, was really to just get a sense in the room, like who really knows what ad effectiveness is? Who's pretty kind of ingrained in it? Raise your hands. Some of you. All right. How many people kind of know, have heard the term? Who just realized that they're in the wrong session? No? Okay. Cool. Well, let me actually then start with a little bit of an intro, because like I said before, it's a kind of a niche area within market research, but it's a really, really important for this group to really understand what we're up to and what this group here is up to, because it's very relevant for a lot of the conversations that you guys have had during the course of the SampleCon, such as API integration and things like that, and low incidence groups. So let me give you a quick little history on ad effectiveness. Right around when the internet started, and the only people sort of buying stuff and navigating the web were guys during their lunchtime, as we heard on yesterday. There was this tech company that understood that there was an opportunity. This tech company was called Dynamic Logic. And they came up with a very interesting solution, because advertisers always want to know whether their advertising is working. In digital, people were very excited because they can check whether people click the ads and whatnot. But if you're a Coke, you're a Pantene, you don't really care if people click an ad. You want to know if the ad generated awareness or made people think, oh, it's like I love Coke more than I did before, right? So Dynamic Logic came up with this very interesting and very clever way of being able to survey respondents that they knew had been exposed to the campaign. And this was important because if you think about it, back in 2000, was it like 1998 or something like that? 99. Being exposed to a digital campaign would have made number one on that top 10 most ridiculous requests from a client, because you're probably talking about a 0.001% incidence back in 1999. So what Dynamic Logic did was they developed its technology that was able to identify. You would put it on the publisher's website or on the creative ad, and you would be able to identify whether someone's been exposed to the campaign. Basically, the ad appeared on the screen, and then they would actually, within that the time that people spent on that on the website, they would actually then invite the respondent to do a survey. And this is great because you were able. This was really the beginning of the research industry, where you were able to tie digital, you were able to tie sort of passive data, in this case exposure to the advertising, to the survey data. Go 15, 16 years in the future, we've gone kind of way beyond those early beginnings. There's still that type of intercept model is still used. It has its benefits, but there's all sorts of other needs that really we've now just starting to tap into. And I think I speak for everyone in the panel. We're very excited to be able to kind of present and talk about this industry to you, because you guys are the supply chain. It's going to be great to be able to tell you some of the things that we're thinking and that we want to do. So that's my little intro. I mean, anyone, if you want to kind of from your perspective, kind of talk a little bit about what is ad effectiveness for you, how you see it, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, you know.
I don't mind starting.
Yeah.
So to me, ad effectiveness is measuring the upper and lower funnel metrics of a campaign. So did the campaign raise awareness? You know, the click-through rates and the engagements of today are so small that the value of digital, if you just look at that, for a marketer, it doesn't make sense to invest in digital. However, there is an absolute branding play at hand with digital, and many dollars are shifting from TV to online to mobile. And how do you measure the ROI of that? And that's what ad effectiveness does.
Yeah, so what I've seen working with Razorfish in my previous role, there's the concept in my head that I have of digital greed, that as things start to become more and more digital, and this was predicted by Razorfish back in 1995 when they started, that everything that can be digital will be. So that's what's happening today. And marketers want to know way more than they wanted to know maybe about 20 years ago. And the more you give them, the more they want. So it goes from, oh, I just want to know if people saw my ad, to knowing whether the person wearing that blue shirt and blue jeans saw the ad and actually went to the store to make a purchase. And how many times do you do that? So that is really, to me, the crux of where partners like you can help, because the more the demands of our advertisers start to be more specific and more granular and more timely, that's where having the right people, the right panels, the right audiences can really help us answer some of those questions very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. When I think of ad effectiveness, it's a couple layers to it, right? So, and it goes beyond, I think, just campaign measurement, but it starts with a copy test, right? Is your creative that you're taking to market impactful? But then there's a lot of questions, and they're not all answered through surveys. And I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Was my ad seen? Was it viewable? Was my ad delivered to the right audience? Things that aren't necessarily measured directly through surveys. And then beyond that, it comes to the attitudinal piece, which is, like everybody has stated before, is it raising awareness, increasing favorability, driving people to purchase, and driving people into the store to convert? So yeah, I think there's a lot to it, and I think part of the key of what we're looking for is really finding creative ways to mix the attitudinal piece with all those other passive measurements and tie it all together, because that's what advertisers are asking for.
And I'll add one other thing, because I agree with pretty much everything that the guys up here said, is when Dynamic Logic got its start, it was about making the internet safe for brand advertising, right? It was a direct response medium, and you could track it from clicks, but brands wanted to know it was a safe place. Today, what brands really want to know is, how do I optimize reaching the right audience? How do I do it in real time? So I buy this media plan, I know who I'm targeting, I know who I want to reach. Am I reaching them? Am I reaching them at scale? Am I reaching them in the right places? Are my ads being delivered not only in view, but at the right time, the right context? So our need from you guys is to be able to reach that audience, to talk to the right people, both leveraging passive data but also survey-based data, so we can understand how quickly our marketing partners can make those changes, right? So that they can optimize a campaign on the fly to deliver better impact.
That's great. And Michael, actually, you brought a really interesting point around, sort of the passive data, all this other data that's typically not survey data, but it's people data. Data that comes from people. I mean, you or Arun, also love your perspective on this from a user's standpoint. Is just the amount of data that's coming out is ridiculous. I mean, you got the social data, you got your exposure data, you have just all the big data. And clients have their own kind of first-party data. Kind of where do you see ad effectiveness, kind of survey-based? We still have to ask certain questions. Where do you see that fitting into the sort of that equation as marketers and advertisers, sort of have access to more data that's not kind of survey-based?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, we hear from clients all the time the demand for more and more of that passive data. Mm-hmm. Don't come in here and talk to me about how you're going to administer surveys, because we've heard it a million times. So I think it is key to figure out, how to do that in an impactful way. Mm-hmm. But I don't see attitudinal survey research going anywhere either, because frankly, in all the research we've done, and I'm sure everybody on this panel has looked at it before, there really is no correlation between clicks and engagements and brand lift. Mm-hmm. There's no correlation. So if, like you said, if you're a Coke, if you're a Tide, you have to know how the how the advertising is impacting your brand, and the only way to do that is to talk to people.
Yeah, the other thing about brand metrics is that the tenure of a brand lift is much longer than an immediate purchase that the person might be willing to make in the next couple of days. So what we have seen is when you account for that time factor, and for some of our clients, when you start taking in longer time frames, you do see the impact of awareness lifts correlating with some measure of behavior such as site visitations or sales or something of that sort. So when we see those kind of correlations over a longer period of time, that allows us to more confidently be able to say that yes, attitudinal metrics do have their place, but then that very fact makes them a little hard to use, because if they are spread out over such a long time, how do you actually bring them in and make day-to-day optimizations? So that's the kind of challenge that we grapple with on a daily basis, and in some cases, we've been able to successfully bring in the attitudinal metrics and tie them to things that happen on a daily basis. For example, we've created a metric called active site visitation rate, which is a combination of a couple of things that we've created, and we've consistently seen that active site visitation rate for our client, one specific financial services client, correlates very strongly with the awareness over a longer period of time. So we know that if we are moving one, we are definitely impacting the other. So to your question about how are awareness surveys and attitudinal surveys going to play out, I think personally, and I've written about this as well, self-reported, reported sentiment is going to be definitely much more valuable going forward rather than asking people a bunch of questions. But to me, I think a combination of the two, if we're able to bring that together to the table, would be the most powerful way of figuring out what the customer is actually thinking and what is the impact that my ad has had on him.
So kind of we're thinking about sort of, surveys are kind of the foundation of a lot of the attitudinal data that we have today. We've added the kind of behavioral, you've been exposed to the ad, but there's all this other data, and I think we certainly see it at Lucid, where the value then comes in is kind of being able to tie all this information together. Is that?
We see the world audience, brand, consideration, and sales.
Yeah.
There's only one of those is survey-based. So audience, what eyeballs did you get? Did you reach your target audience with the media? Brand, which is the survey-based consideration. What did you do after the fact?
Yeah.
With meters and passive tracking, you can tell post-exposures if people did something online, and then sales. Post-exposure, did they go in the store and buy the product? That's what Millward Brown Digital measures.
Yeah. And and tying it back to obviously the audience here is, I know for most of you, your main business is doing surveys, but I think from my perspective, there's opportunity to monetize the panels kind of beyond the surveys.
Absolutely.
And what are your thoughts, Dave?
Well, and I think it comes down to the fact that it's easy to reach certain types of audiences. A primary grocery shopper, female 25 to 54. But our brands aren't interested in that anymore. They want millennials. They want cross-device exposure. So, we can talk about the framework. We know what the framework is. It's finding the right audiences and finding the audiences in a large enough scale so that we can give them a short survey, but we can integrate all of that passive data, their social behaviors, what they're saying, what brands they're talking about, what they're sharing, along with their sort of behaviors, what websites they're visiting, what are they searching on, but do it at scale. We need to find young men. We need to find millennials. We need to find them on mobile devices. That's the challenge. That's the thing we hope you guys can help us with, because that's who our clients, the brands, want to talk to more than anybody else today.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, and to my point of digital greed, now that I don't know if we're even there yet, but the greedy client in me wants that, all right, once we have that panel and we've identified that these are the people that are positively responding to my ads, how can you feed that information back into my media targeting so I can go and find out people that look exactly like them and then talk to them on a much bigger scale? So to me, knowing who's responding to my ads is step one. Step two is, how do I feed that information back to my media folks so they can go and find more people like them?
No, that's really cool. I mean, does anyone have kind of any thoughts on that process in terms of the integration with sort of on the back end and on the front end as well? I don't know, just in terms of what you need from this industry. I mean,
I feel like with many of the people in this room we're already partnered with, so it's API driven, it's programmatic. Post-exposure to a digital asset, we're making real-time calls to your firms and asking for a sample. And we're doing it at massive, massive scale. I think we ran 400,000 completions through our system in December. The opportunity is huge for everybody in this room. And as we can find the millennials, as we can find the Hispanics, you know, the greed that our clients have in terms of wanting to get to this very niche target that they're not reaching with their media. I mean, there's a buying target for media, and then there's their actual target of the people they want to reach. That's all they care about. That's all they want to talk to. And we're doing it at massive, massive scale, and it has to be programmatic. We're not in the business of manual anymore. Digital is, I get exposed to an ad, I need that person immediately. And as decay sets in 4 days, we don't want that person anymore. So it's got to be real time, it's got to be fast, it's got to be programmatic, it all has to be API driven.
I mean, I think we've been talking a lot about kind of what we need and what we want. Let's kind of shift it a little bit and let's think about the respondent. It's like, you know, what experience do you feel, you'd say in the next, like, what is it today and what is it in the next few years? What you think that respondent experience will be like? Anyone?
A couple things. Certainly, it's taking surveys on PCs is dying rapidly, right? Inherent
Doing
on us.
anything on PCs is dying.
Well, that's true. I think inherent on us, though, is working with our clients to help them understand that we can only ask a few questions, and it's okay that we can only ask a few questions. So it's about asking the right questions in a mobile optimized experience, so that we can quickly route people in who we need to talk to into a survey system and get them out, right? So that we're not really interrupting their day, but doing it in a very sort of meaningful way. I think that is the biggest challenge we're all trying to wrestle with today successfully. And more importantly, we all have the capability, but to do it at scale. It comes back then to finding the audience that we can get enough people who we know have the right exposure combinations into our survey systems.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What about the, this idea of the passive data? Us in the digital advertising world, we know like the case studies of, targeting a advertising to pregnant women, and it happens to be like a teenager who hasn't told her parents yet that she's pregnant. But Target knew that she was pregnant, and they targeted an ad for her. It gets kind of creepy. And how do we deal with that as an industry, and how, and what, and even from the respondent standpoint, how do we manage some of that?
Sorry.
Oh, no, I was.
Okay.
It's all you.
Anyone?
No, I thought you were saying.
Touchy subject.
Well, yes, and I think coming back to the respondent experience, to me, I think that's one of the, every time we mention surveys to our clients, there's always that inherent mindset about when you're asking somebody something explicitly, how likely are they to tell you the truth versus what they want you to believe is the truth. And that's been, since the day surveys were born, that's been a problem that we've been trying to solve. So in the digital space, it starts to become a little easier if you start to make that survey experience more seamless and be more natural versus, imagine taking them to a lab and making them sit down and answer a bunch of questions versus having them do it in the comfort of their home versus making them do it on their daily commute. So the more you give that experience in the natural environment, the more likely it is that you'll get answers that are closer to what they're actually thinking. And then the other thing, to your point about passive data, is people are talking so much online without really being asked about things. To me, I think that's where the real wealth of information about what they're really thinking lies. And if we can start to bring that into what we do, then that really, really, really supplements all the survey stuff that we capture. So that allows us to build a wealth of information about that user, and of course in a very privacy-safe manner, because again, you don't want it to get creepy. So if you're able to build that profile for the user in a way that's very privacy-safe, I think the user starts to see the value. Not the target example, but I, for example, used to have an Android, and Google was reading my emails, and I was okay with it because anytime there was a flight delay, I would get an alert on my phone saying, look, your flight's delayed. and then it would tell me, now you should leave for the airport because the traffic is so much and this is how much time. And I know that Google is reading my emails, and that's probably the most private thing that people have, emails. And I'm fine with it because it's providing me the value. So to me, if we are able to balance that value equation, both for the respondent and then in the larger universe, the customer, people are okay to share their data with us. It's only when we just ask for data and don't provide value in return, which is when people start to get angry. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and that ties into some of the conversations yesterday in terms of what, what's in it for the respondent, like the 5 cents for, for a 30-minute screener. Obviously that's an issue. Anyone else, on that?
Well, I think the notion of tapping into passive data, certainly the social or the passion, what people are talking about and engaging with is critical, but it's also better tapping into the way in which media is bought, so the currencies, right? So, we talk about viewability, and a lot of times success is presented as, well, this ad was viewable 80% of the time. Doesn't mean it's a good ad, it just means it was delivered in an environment that more people saw it. So I think it's about figuring out what are those right passive measures that really matter and what the connection points of those measures are as it relates to attitudinal data. What does that mean for you guys? Is working together to figure out what's the best way to connect to what we can get from programmatic platforms from a passive platform or standpoint, integrate that to respondents so that we only need to ask them, and I've said this a few times, a couple of questions to really understand the effectiveness and then translate that back to how do you optimize going forward. Because at the end of the day, a brand wants to understand a campaign's successful based on measures they really understand, awareness, persuasion, impact, as opposed to viewability, as opposed to, we started out with saying clicks, right? Those mean nothing to them.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of integrating the passive data, we can all do it, right? We've all got teams of marketing sciences people, and the info's there. It can all be attached, through ad servers and other data sources, but it's not really efficient, and you really need a clear vision from the client on what they're looking to achieve, because if you don't have that, you can drown yourself in all the data that's out there. So we're always looking for ways to do it efficiently, ways to do it creatively, new technology to help us do it easier, and all those things, help make it, less expensive for the client, which is obviously important for adoption.
Yeah, and we were talking before, right before the session, and Stephen, you brought it up. One of the things that's very different about this space is that because there's so much technical sort of knowledge and there's so much technical effort, it's very rare that we do custom studies. If we do a custom studies, because the idea is to actually then it becomes a product. Because you have to, as you said, Stephen, you have to make it programmatic then. So because the digital marketing and advertising industry expects it. And the only way to do it is just to be able to, do it at scale and do the same process over and over again. And that becomes obviously a very, very interesting proposition for the people here, that it's not, taking a phone call and, every time having to be a consultant on how do we do it. It's actually being a consultant once, figuring out how to do it once, and then really just, and then that becomes a product. And do you feel that that's going to continue to be the model?
For our business, yes. Yeah. Now, our next step is to take what we're doing in the U.S. and rolling out global, and we're well underway with many of the people in this room again. And then mobile. Mobile is huge for the future for us, and having access to device IDs, which I think you're probably going to ask about mobile later. That is 2016 is a year of mobile for Millward Brown Digital, so we have a pretty big checkbook, and we need all of your guys' help to help solve it.
Yeah. Well, let's go into mobile then. You say we need device IDs. Why? Why? Just so everyone kind of understands why we're asking for those.
Device IDs. So if you take your mobile device, it's almost like two devices in one. You have your mobile browser, so if you have an iPhone, your Safari, and then you have the apps that you use. 70% of media is actually delivered to your app. There are no cookies in apps. There are first-party cookies in your mobile browser, the Safari browser, but they don't talk to each other. So it's like measuring two devices in one. And the only way we can have a relationship with an individual post-exposure is to have that device ID. So at Millward Brown Digital, we have 2.3 million device IDs coded up against our Ignite 10 million footprint, and it's growing every day. But we have a supply issue. 2.3 million is not enough. We have 2 million mobile first-party cookies. It's not enough. So for us to be able to measure our demand, we have to figure out the supply issue. We're working on it every single day, but many of the partners in the room, you could be scratching your head, what the hell's a device ID? We need our partners to code up their panels with mobile device IDs so that we can give you money post-exposure. And that's a big focus of ours this year.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, I mean, a device ID essentially is something that Apple and Android invented to kind of replace the cookie. You can actually go into your mobile phone today and reset your device ID. We wouldn't want that because then we don't know who you are anymore. But you have that ability. So it has that. So it has that ability that the consumer is in control. They can reset it if they want to be anonymous. But it's also a way that advertisers and advertising is tracked, how it's targeted on these devices. Arun, do you see any change in that in the near future? Are we still, are we going down this mobile ID path? Is there anything else that we should?
So the way I think about it is, and again, when you said Year of the Mobile, I was at a conference earlier this year where they said we have stopped announcing the Year of the Mobile anymore because it's been going on since 2010. So it was interesting. I think the way I would say is we should continue to collect IDs, but we should start thinking in terms of human IDs, because it's not about mobile IDs, because now there's smart TVs coming and then there's another ID associated with that. And then there are already, I'm not wearing mine today, but there are wearable devices that have another set of IDs or will have another set of IDs associated with them. So at the end of the day, if we start thinking of human ID, meaning that we are actually humans, marketers, who are talking to other humans. And if we start to stop thinking of IDs and start thinking in terms of that human communication, it becomes very real world, because that's how you want to talk to your human counterpart on the customer side. So in that case, what then becomes your 2.3 million device IDs then need to tie back to the other 500,000 smart TV IDs that you've collected that need to tie back to the other 300,000 wearable device IDs that you've collected, so that you're able to build that complete picture of a human who's at the end of your message. To me, I think that's where we should be headed, and that's where, again, if you think of it horizontally, that's kind of how it goes, and if you think of it vertically, in the sense of, here's my customer and this is their awareness level, to here's my customer and they actually walked into the store and made a purchase. Our marketers also want to close that loop. They're not just happy to say, oh, my campaign lifted awareness by 10 percentage points. They also want to know that this increased my revenue by X million dollars. So to be able to tie that vertically in terms of the funnel, and then horizontally in terms of how our consumers are actually interacting with our message in the real world, I think that's going to be the biggest thrust of the challenge. And I think all of you are in a fabulous position to both horizontally and vertically help us solve for that problem, because you have an audience for which you have that that whole matrix of information, and knowing more about that would be just
you have a relationship with a person. That's what we're trying to get at.
Exactly.
The digital world that lives with cookies, and you have a relationship with people, which is great. I do want to leave some time for questions, but I mean, Dave and Michael, any other comments on this? The connected TV, like all this other stuff that's kind of turning digital now.
I just wanted just to add to that last point that Arun made, which was a really good one, is clients 2 or 3 years ago would approach us with a campaign and say, okay, this is the desktop, this is the mobile, we need to measure it. If you have to do it separately, we understand. Those days are so long gone. They just said, this is my campaign, measure it. Yeah, we have mobile and desktop. We don't even know where it's going to go, into what devices it's going to go. We just need a comprehensive measurement plan. So it's just absolutely critical, I think, to stop thinking in terms of desktop versus mobile, and to Arun's point, just think of the people and interviewing people who have been exposed and measuring the campaign holistically like that.
I'd add the same thing.
Cool. All right, so we have 10 minutes for a question, which is exactly where I want it to be. I know Mendy has a question up here, so we'll start with Mendy.
Thank you, that was great. So how are you measuring the shopping and closing the loop? Is it through self-reported questions, or there's a behavioral element that you're tracking on the back end? And then one more question, because I know that if I don't ask it now, I won't get another chance. And it's a quick one. What percentage is display versus pre-roll advertising? in terms of the ad campaign?
Anyone? Yeah.
I'll take the second one first. Pre-roll is about, on an average campaign, between 50 and 60%. But you'll have a lot of campaigns still that use pre-roll as kind of the awareness vehicle, more of lower frequency but higher reach, and then supplement with display, because display can be so inexpensive. The risk, of course, though, is inexpensive display is inexpensive, which means it's crappy, even if it's good creative. The first question, from our perspective, it depends on the category. Sometimes it's self-report, sometimes it's integrating with third-party data sources. There's a lot of good third-party data sources that are out there, but again, it comes down to scale. Can you find enough people who fit that target? Again, primary grocery shopper, women 25 to 54, sure. Young males, no.
Yeah. Just one quick thing, and I'll let you guys so just for everyone's digital knowledge, this is one of the things you find out in this industry really quick is the lingo, gets out of control. So just for everyone's, a pre-roll is a video that appears right before the actual video that you want to watch. So you go to ESPN to look at the highlights. It's like a TV, 15-second ad, and then the display ads are like more like the staticky ones on the, on the square. So anyone on?
I'll just add to the piece about closing the loop. So we do a little bit of work in that area, mostly global. So GfK, aside from the brand research division, we have a big practice area that collects point-of-sale store-level data in a number of different categories globally. So if a client approaches us and wants to understand attitudinal research and then people that are going to stores and buying products, it's really a very custom process. So we look at the markets that the advertising's in, we look at the store-level data we have, and we have our our marketing sciences team model out how the advertising is impacting sales.
Yep. And for us, we're working with all of you. We're matched to Polk and MasterCard and Nielsen Catalina and Shopcom to get at offline sales. We're also matching to the DirecTVs, the Cablevisions, the Dishes of the world to pull in more passive data from a TV exposure perspective. We're working with many people in this room to do that.
Yeah. And you can think of it as as an append, at least on the sort of the ROI side. You're basically appending to the survey data to those respondents. You're appending that sales data if you can match, and that's the importance of being able to match people, because we need to know that this person got exposed, this person completed the survey. We also want to know if this person bought the product. So
we've had some of our best success when the tool is actually person specific. So if it's, let's say as an example, it's a mobile specific measurement tool, and they're able to tie the mobile exposure data to actual location, we are able to do that closed loop attribution very efficiently, because we know this person was exposed on this device, and then they actually went into the store, which we know by their location, and then they made that purchase, and hopefully at some point we will have purchase data available through all the mobile transactors. That will really help us to close the loop. But we could have a separate session on just that whole piece and not be done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it does bring a thought in my head is, this group here is in a very unique position in the ecosystem, because what you're talking about is these are companies, tech companies, that are doing these matching without people knowing that this is happening.
Yeah.
You guys have a relationship. You have an audience. You have a relationship with these people. You have the ability to actually be transparent, to actually, tell, just basically, to fulfill, what Casbro and SMR are going to tell us to do, is be transparent with the public, with your audience, with your respondents, in terms of what you're doing. That gives this industry, a very clear positioning, voice, and and a pedestal, and something to stand on against all these other approaches that are really just doing things kind of under the table. So I just wanted to bring that up because obviously the privacy. I went to the privacy session the other day, and and it's a very important subject for us, and I think we as an industry we can stand tall if kind of we do the right things. So, any other questions? Yes. Right there.
I have a quick question. Millward Brown is utilizing APIs in a big way. Who else up in the panel is also utilizing APIs?
Well, Ipsos has partnered with, ironically, our biggest competitor, Millward Brown, with SafeCount to take advantage of a lot of the work they do. And the reason we do that is instead of trying to build our own infrastructure and put a bunch of tags out there that we need to manage and update, and more importantly, it makes it more onerous for our marketing partners, we believe the sort of philosophy that SafeCount developed in 2007 to become the digital data collection tool, a partner out there. So we get to leverage, by paying them a good amount of money, those sort of API connections on a lot of cases. We think that's a smart philosophy as well. Wish SafeCount was further separated from you guys in some respects, but I think it benefits everybody, because once SafeCount can solve it, it's an opportunity that a lot of market research firms can then take advantage of. So it allows you to partner with one firm, work hard on what those connections are, and then the industry can benefit. So it makes it more streamlined, more efficient for everyone.
Obviously, Lucid uses APIs, and we work with lots of different companies as well. So so I think it's like Steven said, it's critical, and there's probably going to be consolidation. There's already a big player in terms of SafeCount, but obviously we have our own system, and there may be others, but the industry and the ecosystem can handle 100 different suppliers for the technology. It's just not scalable. There's certifications, there's all sorts of things that need to happen. So.
Yeah, great presentation, guys. I'm delighted that you all take the privacy stuff very seriously. I do a lot of that consulting, and I think that with how the industry is evolving, I'm very excited. This is going to have large implications in terms of how the revenue is driven, what you're able to do. With the kind of data you're dealing with, I think there is a real risk for some privacy issues. I mean, up till now, it was really sort of low risk, and then what kind of stuff, because now you're going to have the ability to tie all sorts of other things together, where somebody who makes a complaint can get a hold of the FTC, and there could be. So, I mean, I'm glad you're thinking about it. As an industry, I think it's very important now that you work with your suppliers so that not only your privacy policy is aligned, but everybody in the transaction chain is aligned. So it's good to see.
Thanks. Anything else? Good. I think there's one back there. Yeah. And we're gonna start the day on time. We got 2 more minutes, so.
The ability to identify people is very important in this industry. You need to fingerprint people either through the device IDs or IP addresses or something along those lines. Cookies is a big part as well. Obviously, there's government policies that want to restrict that tracking. There's Apple or Google who might want to restrict, to do not track technology, to not be able to follow those people anymore. How does your company ensure that the sample will remain representative in those projects?
Anyone?
Well, you know what? That's a big challenge, and it's about partnering with you guys to do that. Key is transparency. We don't want to surreptitiously collect information and use it for market research purposes, because you can do that, and then you get in trouble, and it's a lot bigger of an issue than simply satisfying a client project. So it's about figuring out the best way to partner with you folks who have those direct relationships with the consumer, right? You have that sort of privacy policy in place. We work together to understand how we can leverage that, how we can align with that, so that we're interviewing people, we're collecting data on people who have agreed to participate in that, right? And we don't want to do any tricks, because that's not going to benefit anybody.
And I mean, it goes back to also the value proposition for the respondent. Arun is completely fine for Google to sift through his emails, but Google is providing a value for it, for that data. So I think that's part of it. Also, scale. We kind of talked about it. Scale solves a lot of things, and having the industry, and I know in this industry in particular, has really kind of pooled resources, historically, because we know scale solves a lot of things, and and like I said before, just it doesn't make any sense to have 1,000 different tech providers. So, but great question and something that we deal with, and no one else wants to answer. All right, I think that's it. So thanks a lot, everyone, for getting here. 9:15 in the morning, and almost everyone here. And thanks to panel very much. I really appreciate it, particularly flying from the West Coast and flying from Snowmageddon in New York.